The topic for today is Introduction to Rates and Unit Rates. The essential question is, what are rates and unit rates, and how do you write them? And when you're given a rate, how can you get the unit rate? So the first thing that I really want you to make sure you do is I always want you to label the numerator and denominator of rates and unit rates. Okay, so we're going to put that off to the side right here just as a reminder. Always label the numerator. That's the top number of a fraction. And the denominator, which is the bottom number of the fraction. Because I want you to write your rates and unit rates as fractions. So you always label the numerator and the denominator of rates and unit rates. Okay. So, given the situation, 4 packs of gum cost $8. The rate, that's just where you just use the information they gave you and write a fraction with it. So, it costs $8, and I'm labeling it. So, I'm not just putting just a plain old 8, I'm putting the dollar sign to represent money. And it's $8 for 4 packs of gum. So, I put 4 packs. Okay? That's all that the rate is. And in a couple moments, I'm going to tell you that I always want you to typically put money on the top. The numerator. Okay, unit rate. For unit rates, that means the denominator has to equal 1. Okay, so you want that denominator, the bottom number, to equal 1 pack. Okay, unit rate will always have 1 in the denominator. All right, so you can basically put 1 on the bottom of every single one of these. So anyway, 4 divided by what number is going to give you 1? It would be 4. So we're going to divide by 4. And whatever you do to that, the denominator, you got to do this to the numerator. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, and make sure to label it. So your unit rate is $2 for 1 pack of gum. Okay, the next example. You traveled 145 miles in 2 hours. So in a couple moments, I'm going to let you know that I typically want you to write miles on the top and time on the bottom. So 145, and make sure you label it. And you did that in 2 hours. So see how it's always labeled? Right as a fraction and always label it, okay? And I want to know the unit rate. And so the denominator in a unit rate has to be 1. So 2 divided by what number gives you 1? Well, it's 2. So we're going to divide the denominator by 2 and also the numerator. So 145 divided by 2 is 72 and 5/10. And don't forget to label it. Miles. Okay, so you went 72.5 miles in 1 hour, 72.5 miles per hour. Okay, the next couple of examples are ones we did in class. You can do these on your own if you want, but you don't really have to if you're watching this for the first time at home, okay? So it says, how many jumping jacks can you do in 40 seconds? So you'd set a timer for 40 seconds and count how many jumping jacks you can do. Write that rate down here and then divide by that denominator for both of the numbers, and you'd get your unit rate. And then it says, how many times can you stand up and sit back down in your chair in 1.5 minutes? So you could set a timer for 1.5 minutes and do the exact same thing to find the rate and unit rate. And then this one, you kind of need your class, so I don't think you could probably do this one at home. How many times can the class clap hands in 3 minutes? So you can't do that at home. Anyway, for your summary, this is what I want you to write. Rates are ratios where the two terms you're comparing are in different units. So see all these rates up here? We're comparing money to packs of gum, miles to hours. Okay, so they're rates. Here we were comparing jumping jacks, the number of jumping jacks per seconds. Right here, how many times can you stand up and sit back down per minute? Here we're comparing claps per minute, all right? So see how the rates, where the terms are different. When you're comparing two different things, they're called rates, okay? The second part is a unit rate. Unit rates are ratios where one of the terms you're comparing has a value of 1, okay? And that would be in the denominator. Okay, go ahead and reread what you just wrote to make sure you understand it, and then turn the page. On the second page, it says, it's best to write rates and unit rates as fractions and label the terms with units. So write them as fractions and label those terms with units. So label the denominator, the bottom number, and label the top number, which is the numerator. Label them, okay? So as I mentioned this on the previous page, I want you to have total cost or the distance in the numerator section of your fraction. So typically in situations dealing with the total cost of something or the distance of something, make that term the numerator when you're setting up your rates, okay? And then typically in situations dealing with time, make that term the denominator. So the bottom number would be time. Okay? And then just something that you're gonna eventually need to know is that numerator is going to be the dependent variable. Okay, and then that denominator is going to be the independent variable. And you don't need to memorize this really right now, but I want you to know dependent variables are typically y and independent variables are typically x, okay? And I'll explain more on that later, okay? All right. So if you're wondering about, well, what if the problem you're working on has nothing to do with cost or distance or time? In those type of situations that don't involve distance, cost, or time, you got to decide which term you want to equal 1, and you put that in the denominator. Because remember, with unit rate, you want the denominator to equal 1. So if you're curious about something, you make that, if you want that number, that value to be 1, you put that in the denominator. All right, and I'll show you an example as we start moving through this, where it doesn't deal with cost, distance, or time. Okay? So here's just a little diagram that I want you to kind of study so you remember. Typically, when you're dealing with distance or cost, that's going to go in the numerator, but don't forget to label it. And typically, when you're dealing with a story problem that's got something to do with time, you're going to make that denominator and make sure you label it. Okay? So in these next examples, I want you to practice writing rates and unit rates. So Sprint charges $54 for 450 minutes. So just a reminder, well, $54, that's a cost, so that would go in the numerator. Oh, and 450 minutes, that's time, so that goes in the denominator. So this is pretty straightforward, but remember to label it. So it's $54 for 450 minutes, and you can abbreviate in this section if you want. You don't have to write out minutes, but I would know what you're talking about, okay? So that was the rate. Now to find the unit rate, you want the denominator to equal 1, so I know I want to equal 1 minute. So here's where you do the thing where you're like, well, 450 divided by what number would equal 1? Well, you divide by 450. And do that to the numerator also. So 54 divided by 450, that is going to give you 12 cents. Okay, so it's 12 cents per minute. If you talked for 2 minutes, that would be 24 cents because it's a proportional relationship. More on that later. Okay, number 2, Conoco sells 15 gallons of gas for $50. So I see that there's cost right there, and the total cost typically will go in the numerator, so that's what I'm put on in the numerator section. $50 for 15 gallons. Okay, and I'm abbreviating it. And then for the unit rate, you know that the denominator has to equal 1. So I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator both by 15. So the denominator by 15 and the numerator by 15. 50 divided by 15. You're going to get 3.33333 or something like that. So since it's money, you want to always round money to the nearest hundredths place, okay? Okay, the last one on this page. A 17-ounce box of Lucky Charms costs $4.89. So I see there's a total cost right there. That'll be my numerator. And my denominator is that 17 ounces. OZ is how you represent ounces. And my unit rate, I want the bottom to equal 1 ounce. So 17 divided by what number is 1? Well, it's divided by 17. So divide also the numerator by 17. 49 divided by 17, and make sure you're rounding it to the nearest hundredth properly, because you should get 29 cents per ounce. Okay? On this page, the first problem says a Jeep can go 300 miles on 20 gallons. So for the rate, if you recall from the previous page, you want cost or distance as the numerator, and if it deals with time, you want time in the denominator. Okay? So I see that it can go 300 miles. 300 miles, that's a distance. So I want to put that as the numerator. And make sure you label, please. I'm just going to abbreviate. So that right there is the rate. And then for the unit rate, you know that the denominator has to equal 1. So this is where you would go, well, 20 divided by what number is 1? And it's 20. Any number divided by itself is 1. So if you do that to the denominator, you also divide the numerator by 20. And 300 divided by 20 is 15. Now, what did I forget to do? Label it. Always label it so you know what it means. Okay, so it's 15. You can go 15 miles per gallon. Okay, number 5, babysitting for 6 hours and earning $57. Well, I see 6 hours, and that is a time, so I know that's going to go in the denominator. And also, this 57, that's the cost, kind of, for babysitting. Someone would pay you for 6 hours, so that would go on the numerator. Okay, and then for your unit rate, you would get 1 hour because you divided by 6 and divide by 6. And I do like you to write that little extra step right there, because then it kind of reinforces that, oh yeah, I'm supposed to go 57 divided by 6 and get $9.50. Okay. 6 cans of peas cost $1, so there's a cost right there, so $1. And I get 6 cans. And I want to find the unit rate. So I want to know how much is 1 can. So I'm going to divide by 6, divide by 6. 1 divided by 6. You should get probably a decimal. And I want to make sure you're rounding it correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I got. So I would go 1 divided by 6. And you see right here how we get this. Since it's money, I want you to round to the nearest hundredth. So that's the hundredths place. But remember, to round, you need to look at the thousandths place. And you need to see if that number is 5 or above. So if that number behind it is 5 or above, then this 6 right there will turn into a 7. If it is not 5 or above, or if it's below 5, then that 6 would stay the same. And since the number behind it is a 6, which is 5 or above, this 6 turns into a 7, so it'd be 17 cents per can. And watch how I write it. So you put your $sign, put your decimal like that, okay? Please don't do the decimal like that, 0.17, and put the cent sign, because that doesn't work out that way, okay? So that's how I want you to write it, please. Okay, number 7, 30 pack of pencils cost $7.97. Well, I see a total cost right there of $7.97, and I get a 30 pack of pencils. 30 pencils. So I want to know how much does 1 pencil cost to find that unit rate. So I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by 30, so I know how much 1 pencil cost. And $7.97 divided by 30. I want you to make sure you're rounding it correctly. 7.97 divided by 30 is this. Okay, so think about how to round it. You're looking at that. That's the hundredths place because it's money. And you see the number behind it is 5 or above, so that 6 turns into a 7. So it's 27 cents per pencil. Don't forget your $sign. Okay, next one. You can run 40 meters in 60 seconds. So I see this right here is dealing with time. Oh, and this is dealing with distance. So, distance on the top and time on the bottom. And to find the unit rate, you're going to divide the numerator and the denominator both by 16 because that's what the denominator is. Because you want the denominator of your unit rate always to equal 1. 16 divided by 16 is 1. 40 divided by 16 is 2.5 or 2 5/10. Okay? And label. Okay, a restaurant had 360 customers in 30 days. Oh, 30 days, that's the measurement of time, so that's going to be my denominator. And 360 customers is the numerator. And to get the unit rate, we know we want it to be how many customers in one day. So I'm going to divide by 30. 360 divided by 30 is 12. So 12 customers per day. Okay. Cost of school $1,137.50 to buy 350 books. So I see a cost. I'm going to put that as the numerator. And label everything. So to find the unit rate, you know that you've got to divide by 1, because 350 you divide by 350 to get 1 for your unit rate. So divide by 350, and $1,137.50 divided by 350 is $3.25 per book. Okay, after 4 minutes of exercise, 44 calories are burned. So I see that 4 minutes of exercise, that's 4 minutes, so that's time. So that's going to go in the denominator. And then we got 44 calories. I'm abbreviating it. And to find the unit rate, you want the denominator to equal 1, because a unit implies 1 of something. So divide by 4, divide by 4. 44 divided by 4 is 11, so 11 calories per minute. Okay, this bottom one, it says for every 12 problems your teacher does, you must do 8. So if you recall from the previous page right over here, in situations that don't involve distance, cost, or time, just decide which term you want to equal 1 and put that in the denominator. You know, put that in the bottom. Which one do you want to equal 1? Okay? So this particular situation does not deal with cost, time, or distance. So think about which would make more sense to equal 1. And when I think about it, I want to know, well, gosh, for every 1 problem the student does, how many does the teacher have to do? Okay, so if I'm concerned about how many problems the teacher has to do if a student does 1, I would want the student number of problems on the bottom, because I would want that one to equal 1. Okay, and here's what that would look like. So I'm going to put 12 teacher problems. I'm going to abbreviate teacher problems, because the student does 8. I'm abbreviate, that's a nice one, stud probs. Okay, and so I want to know, well, if a student does 1 problem, how many did the teacher have to do? Okay, oops, sorry, I should have wrote that in blue so it matches. Okay, so 8 divided by what number equals 1? Well, it's 8. So 12 divided by 8, you would get 1 5/10, or 1 1/2. Okay, so what this means is when you, the student when you do 1 problem, the teacher has to do 1 1/2 problems. Okay? All right, go ahead and turn the page. If you know the unit rate, you can figure out the value of other quantities too, due to proportionality. Okay, so here's what I mean by that. For example, if a car can go 33 miles per gallon, how many miles can go on 9 gallons? So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find that unit rate. And with this particular problem, it's kind of straightforward just because it shows right here and it says per gallon. So that means on 1 gallon, per gallon, you can go 33 miles. So since that right there is going to be the denominator of 1 gallon, that right there is my unit rate. So let me kind of illustrate that in case I'm making you confused. So that's a distance, 33 miles per gallon, so per every 1 gallon of gas, okay? And I do want you to go ahead and draw a box around that, because you know what? That right there, that's the unit rate. And if you know the unit rate, you can figure out other values due to proportionality, okay? So we are concerned about, we want to know how many miles it can go on 9 gallons. So if you need to kind of match this. So you see gallons is in the denominator. I'm going to put 9 gallons right here because that's what we're concerned about. Okay, so we need to make 2 matching equation, or two matching fractions that are equivalent, okay? So we did play a game in class a couple weeks ago where you would, there was a board game and you had two fractions and there was one that was missing. So the numerator was missing out of the fraction. So you had to figure out what number multiplied by this would give you this value, and you had to do that to the numerator as well. So similar to that game, which is why we played the game in the first place, this will prepare you for that. So 1 times what number gives you 9 gallons? Well, it's times 9. So if you multiply the denominator by 9, you got to multiply the numerator by 9. So 33 times 9 gives you 297, and make sure you label it. Miles, okay? So to interpret this, you can go 297 miles on 9 gallons, which answers the question, okay? So your answer would be, you can go 297 miles on 9 gallons. And I do want this statement, okay? Because just by looking at it like this, I can't really assume that you know what we're talking about. So when you give me that sentence, it's kind of reassuring to me for me to understand that, okay, you get it. You can interpret what this fraction is saying, okay? So number 2, if you can buy 10 cans for $1.95, how much would 15 cans cost? Now with this one, I don't see the unit rate because it doesn't tell me how much one can would cost. So your job first is to find the rate in order to find the unit rate. So it says you can buy 10 cans for $1.95. I see this is a total cost right there. So I have $1.95, and that will give me 10 cans. So see how I want you to label it? It's to help you understand it, okay? So we are concerned about the unit rate. So I want to know how much 1 can costs. And so to go from 10 to 1, I had to divide by 10 and do that to the numerator also. $1.95 divided by 10. Let me go ahead and show you. It's this, okay? And remember, you're dealing with money. So I don't ever see like 0.195 cents. This would be, you need to round to the nearest hundredth. So, okay, I see 0.19, 19 cents, but then look at the number behind it. It's 5 or above. So yeah, this 9 would turn into, a 10, but you got to factor in, oh yeah, I have to make this 20 cents. So 0.20, okay? So it's 20 cents per can. Okay, that right there, put your box around it, that is the unit rate. That's what's going to help you figure out the rest of the problem. Okay? So to find the unit rate, we found it. We set up the rate and then we divided it to figure out the unit rate. Now what we're concerned about is we're asking how much did 15 cans cost? And you see that the cans are on the bottom, so I want it to say 15 cans on the bottom to match. And 1 times what number gives you 15? Well, it's 15. Okay, so then you're going to take this numerator, 0.20, 20 cents, and you're going to multiply by 15. Please make sure you put that decimal there. If you don't put a decimal there, you're going to get a weird number that wouldn't make any sense for 15 cans, okay? And when you go 20 cents times 15, you would get 3, which is $3. Okay? So it costs $3 for 15 cans, which answers the question. But I do want that statement. It costs $3 for 15 cans. Okay? You should pause the video and see if you can do number 3 on your own. If you make $72 for babysitting for 8 hours, how much will you make for 12.5 hours? Again, there's no unit rate. It doesn't say, hey, you make $12 an hour. It doesn't say anything like that. Or $5 per hour. If it said something like that, then boom, you would know that's the unit rate. However, it doesn't give you that. So you have to figure out the unit rate by first figuring out the rate. Okay, so I see there's a money. Oh, and then time. So time's always on the bottom. So I have $72 for babysitting those 8 hours. Okay, that's not the unit rate, that's just the rate. Okay, so to find the unit rate, we need to make the denominator 1. So 8 divided by what number gives you 1? Well, it's divided by 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1, so 72 divided by 8, well, that gives you 9. So you make $9 per hour. And yes, please draw a box around that so I know that you are recognizing the unit rate, because that unit rate will help you figure out the unknown information due to something called proportionality, which is what we'll talk about later on, okay? So they are concerned about 12 and a half hours, and I see the hours is on the bottom, the denominator, so I'm going to write 12 and a half hours. And you're going to figure out the corresponding numerator to make these fractions equal, okay? So 1 hour times what is going to give you 12 and a half? Well, 1 times 12 and a half, or 12 and 5/10, same thing. Okay? When you go 9 times 12 and 5/10, don't forget your decimal, you get this, $112.50, okay? Now I do want you to write the statement. So how much will you make for 12 and a half hours? You'll make, whoops, that one too many L's. You'll make $112.50 for working 12 and a half hours. Okay, for your summary. So these are the answers, okay? Okay, so for your summary, I want you to write down this fun fact. These are other names for unit rate, and yes, you're going to be seeing them in the future, so it'd be a good idea to memorize these, okay? These are other names for unit rate. So instead of saying unit rate, I can say something called constant of proportionality. And yes, your book will use that, so memorize that. Constant of proportionality. Okay. Other words that mean unit rate are constant rate, and K. The letter K can also mean unit rate, okay? Your book uses that. Another word that means unit rate, in other words, is scale factor. Sometimes they use the letter R to represent the unit rate. And this one right here, Y divided by X. So if you're like, where did that come from? Y divided by X. To get unit rate, I'm going to kind of refresh your memory about this. Remember how we wrote this? So the dependent variable divided by the independent variable, that's going to give you the unit rate, Y divided by X. More on that later, so don't stress out about that, okay? All right. So instead of saying unit rate, you can say any of those above words. So try to use them in a sentence in class sometime and kind of wow your friends, okay? So if they're asking for the unit rate, you can say, you mean the constant proportionality? All right, have a good day. Bye.